Well, firstly, we want to thank the OAAA and the Geopath committee for another fantastic convention. I'm having a great time. We're having a great time. Hopefully you guys are having a fantastic time. And I wanted to thank them for the opportunity for us to stand up here and to talk about a topic that the three of us are actually quite passionate about. And that topic is automation. By a quick show of hands, how many people in this room know really what automation is? Okay, I have a rough idea. How many people are scared shitless about what automation could be? Okay, I know I was. As an agency person, I thought the worst things. You know, the title of the workshop is, you know, the uprising of the machines. Like, are these machines? Is automation going to come and take our jobs? You know, I think that was the sentiment. That was the feeling when automation became a topic of conversation a few years ago. And what we want to do is we want to introduce you guys to where we currently are with automation right now in our industry, where we see automation going in the next couple of years, and hopefully we can change that narrative, change that tone, and hopefully everyone will be aligned and understand that automation is actually good for our industry. It's actually a fantastic thing. It allows us to be much more efficient, allows us to be better at what we currently do, and not have to waste so much time on the mundane processes that take up so much of our day-to-day. So without further ado, I want to introduce two of the most impressive and smartest people I've met in our industry, Lucy Markowitz and Ian Bowman.
Thanks for the intro. So for those of you guys that don't know me, I'm Lucy Markowitz, VP of Sales at Vistar Media. Just to kind of give some background on what Vistar does, Vistar is an end-to-end programmatic solution in the out-of-home ecosystem. So you can kind of think of our business as being split in half. Many of you guys in the room are pretty well-versed, just kind of seeing some of our buyers that are actually here that are accessing our DSP and figuring out ways to kind of infuse data and technology into the buying space for out-of-home. We also have an SSP as well, which helps many of our media owner partners to be able to better monetize their inventory.
I have one. Hey, I'm Ian Bowman Henderson. I have the great pleasure of being the Director of Marketing for Do Media. Many of you are probably familiar with us again. We do about 1/3 of all the agency business in the U.S. and out-of-home goes through our platform. In addition to that, we have the largest database of out-of-home inventory in the U.S., over 1 million assets, and we recently launched our local marketplace product, billboardsin.com. Basically what we want to do is break down the walls between buyers and sellers and help out-of-home advertising as an industry really reach its full potential. And as we'll talk about in a moment here, I really think there is still a huge amount of unfulfilled potential. We talked about that, heard about that a little bit this morning, which is why it is my great pleasure to speak with all of you today. So I'm super excited. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. I think what we need to do now is just start with the basics. Can you guys, in your own terms, try to define what you feel, or how you define automation?
Want to take this one?
No, you know, you can take it. Ladies first, ladies first. You're all good. Nice. Wow.
Machines coming to help us out.
Coming out.
So I guess my view of automation is using technology to simplify processes. You know, Vistar as a programmatic company, I kind of want to just lay the foundation that while automation is a huge part of what enables the programmatic ecosystem to work, there's a lot of other facets that benefit from automation that are not part of programmatic, and then also there's a number of other facets of programmatic that are outside of just automation. So kind of want to lay that groundwork a little bit, just because I know there's a lot of panels at the conference about programmatic that I think we want to sort of stick more to the automation topic for today.
Yeah, so what we talk about when we're talking about automation is really the ability to shift repetitive, you know, basically low value added work from, you know, salaried, educated, very intelligent human beings to machines, so that human beings can do the stuff that historically has driven like all of our success over all of history, which is, you know, collaboration, creativity, innovation, work that the people in this room are uniquely qualified to do, because you guys are all too smart to just do spreadsheets all the time. I love you, and I don't want that to be all of our futures.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. So you guys have spent quite a number of years with your respective organizations. Could you guys walk us through what you would outline as the biggest benefits to automation?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Lucy alluded to a little bit, media experts have already seen a lot of the benefits of automation start to come to fruition. We'll basically, on the expert buying side, just continue to see a greater and greater shift towards high-value work. But where I really think we're on the cusp of seeing something really brand new is on the SMB side. And that shouldn't be super surprising, right? Because change often starts on the margins, which in this case is a small cadre of very experienced buyers, and moves towards the center, which in out-of-home is the 50 cents of every dollar that comes from local direct advertising. So this year, actually, 3.6 million people are going to Google, how do I buy billboards in the name of a place? And 75% of those people have never bought out-of-home advertising before. So brand new people, that's true growth. And what's, I think, even the more surprising statistic is that 100% of those people are totally clueless. They have no idea what they need. They don't know what they're doing. They're very nervous because they're about to make a high-value purchase on something they don't have a lot of experience with. And frankly, the industry just isn't equipped to serve those people economically, because to an expert salesperson, a highly qualified salesperson, those look like tire kickers that really don't have any money. And so it's not economical. But the truth is, they're looking for billboards. They're trying hard to get them, right? They're going out and Googling, how do I buy a billboard? They're willing to give up a lot of their personal information to get that data about what's available and how much it costs. And their money is real. I mean, 50 cents of all of our paychecks comes from local advertisers, and so we should be really serious about how we apply automation to those people so that we can lower the barrier to entry to making your first out-of-home purchase. And that technology exists right now. So that's really what we're interested in at Do Media. We think that's a huge growth potential, and the impact on the supply side is going to be very complementary to that, right? So it won't surprise anybody in this room that we'd like to see higher utilization rates across the industry. And you know, often we portray that as an inventory problem, right? Like, it's easy to sell the premium stuff, it's hard to sell the less premium stuff. But really that's a time problem, right? Because it's really about having to make a choice about where your next minute is most valuable to invest. And if you only have a finite amount of time, you're of course going to invest in selling your best clients, building those best relationships with high value, sophisticated buyers, and selling them premium inventory. But if time wasn't a factor, and by the way, with automation it isn't a factor, then of course you would try and be very successful at unloading all of those boards, because every board is an audience, every audience has some amount of money, and so when time isn't a factor, the idea of premium inventory becomes a lot less defensible. So I think what we'll see is that salespeople will continue to cultivate relationships, work with high-value buyers, but the floor will drop out for being able to service the long tail of this industry that, again, is just as big and just as prominent, though not as represented, as all of the incredible agency people that are here today.
Yeah, I think kind of focusing a little bit more on the demand side of things, I think where automation is going to bring the most benefits is going to go back to that time shift. I think right now there are a lot of tools that are being built to allow for people to spend their time on more complex tasks. A lot of that being about how we can infuse data into the space. So part of this just goes back to how we can make better decisions, how we can make better decisions on, you know, what inventory we should be buying, where should we be buying it, thinking about optimizations. So if we can spend less time within that planning process, kind of being able to easily know what is available, but also then what should we be buying. I think that's going to allow for the industry to kind of move forward and be allowed to see parity with a lot of the other channels that have been leveraging this data. And I think when you think about how automation comes into play, you know, we're talking about billions of pieces of data. This isn't really something that you can, you know, number crunch by hand. So automation is key in being able to see the surge in just how far we can take things, how much we can do in out of home that will mimic the successes we've seen in other channels, and allow us to just make smarter decisions on behalf of our clients and optimize campaigns, you know, using the information that we have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think that's a really important note on the data piece, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit. But Lucy, on the other end, during your experience at Vistar, what are some of the challenges you've faced, some of the obstacles you've faced, either through the industry or through clients or agency partners on pushing for automation?
Yeah, so I guess I would look at it almost in two ways that sound rather opposite. I think one is we find that a lot of our buyers are looking for ways to make certain things that are fairly complex in out of home easier. So I think one example of that is just creative. I don't know if you guys were listening to the programmatic panel earlier, but kind of thinking about how out of home does have a lot of different formats. And specifically at Vistar, we're dealing with a lot of different digital formats. These are all different size screens, across 60 plus media owners. So when we think about how do we allow for a creative team not to spend their time just taking one creative and making 700 versions of that. So one of the things that we've found automation to be really beneficial in is thinking about the resizing and transcoding process and having that be a very simple part of now being able to activate an out of home, where typically that's actually often a big barrier. So also thinking about ways to take assets, video assets that might be available for online inventory, like a YouTube video where you're thinking about a 16:9, where you can actually leverage that in a lot of the digital place-based. So making that creative process easier, I think there's a lot of benefits there. I think on the other side, just thinking again about the complexity in the space. So being able to do more. So thinking about kind of how do you leverage, whether it's the audiences that you want to reach or, kind of going back to the creative aspect of thinking about how do we do better dynamic targeting and how do we activate campaigns based on things that are happening in real time. So I think a lot of that really can't be done without automation. I also think that being able to automate those processes helps to remove a lot of the opportunities for error. So kind of using machines in many ways can help to eliminate some of the things that can potentially bring very simple mistakes that can greatly affect, your campaigns.
Ian?
So unlike Vistar, Do Media doesn't do ad serving. So when we talk about automation, we're really talking about automating the buying and selling and planning processes. And yeah, over the years, we definitely have run into our fair share of challenges. Some people might remember that Do Media actually rolled out a completely automated and algorithm-driven planning tool and buying tool back in 2010. If you don't remember, it's probably good because the reaction from the industry to that was passionate, to say the least. So what we've learned from that is really that we need to be diplomatic and we need to be a strong partner and that we need to help people see the incremental benefit before we ask for more incremental behavior change. So really what we've learned is that our watchwords need to be that we need to listen more and that we need to be as much of a high-touch company with our users and our customers as we are a high-tech company. Because the truth is that while automation, the net gain is going to be that we all are going to be much, much more successful and super duper rich. It's going to be awesome for everyone in this room. The reality where the rubber meets the road is that we are going to have to change, all of us in this room, on some level how we do our job. And being empathetic to that and being compassionate to that and being a partner so that we work to find out what the next thing we should build is and make sure that it's going to be leveraged effectively is a lesson that we have been very fortunate to learn.
Absolutely. Interesting note about the creative optimization, because at PosterScope we've really embraced that through our live poster platform. It really allows us to automate the creative digital out-of-home process. I can't tell you guys enough about how many hours it's saved on both the client side, the creative side, the media side, the agency side, and it allows us to really bring to life really intelligent and dynamic campaigns, which without automation really wouldn't be possible. So that's a really good point, Lucy. Another question for you. So I want to take it back to the data conversation. So data has really been, the massive innovation opportunity over the last, let's say, year or so. How do you guys ingest data, or what's your stance? What's your take on data and the automation process with data?
Yeah, so I think, the first thing is from an agency perspective, you're seeing more and more acquisitions happening in the space of large holding companies purchasing other data companies or building data practices within. And I think this is something that's been fairly common across a lot of channels where, you're able to ingest this data and apply it to more of your typical digital channels. And I think when you think about an omni-channel approach, you want to make sure that this is also affecting how you're thinking about out of home. And I think this sort of helps us to recognize some other opportunities. I think a great example of this is actually some of the synergies between Vistar and Posterscope and Dentsu, where you guys have, built out this huge data platform within Merkle and M1, and being able to really get your brands to believe in particular audiences. And so if they're believing in these audiences across other channels, we want to help to make those same audiences useful in out of home. So this is where kind of automation comes into play. If we can understand the consumers that are part of a particular audience segment and then match that to something like location data, where, again, that's an automated process. It's not a person that's matching up those millions and millions of IDs. But if we can then understand if this is the customer base that we want to reach, we can understand based on that location data where those consumers are spending time, how they intersect both where and when with the inventory that's being bought and out of home. It allows us to now do something that we could never do before. And it's, the ability to have a buy that's actually audience driven based on not just data that is in the space, but it's specific data that clients are asking for. And from a holding company perspective, it allows you to say, we're doing this across every single channel. And I think that in itself has been just a huge thing to bring to the table for clients to be able to think about how they can target audiences in a completely different way than they ever could before.
Absolutely.
So at Do Media, our relationship and our thinking about large data sets and measurement sets and audience sets, really actually the relationship you guys described is a great example of how we feel about it, which is that data should be a marketplace in its own right? It should be between the client and the agency to decide what data is valuable, and go out and seek the data sources that they feel are reputable. And then it's our job as a tech provider, as a neutral platform, to make sure that data can be used. But it isn't our job to go out and say, to play the kingmaker and say, this data set is good, that data set is bad. It brushes up against influencing buying and planning decisions, which our promise from the very beginning as a platform, and I think one that's helped us grow, has been that we would never, ever, ever do anything that influences what gets bought. We would merely decrease friction in the buying process, and data is just one more lens on that. So the long and short of it is, Ahmad, tell me what data we should have in Do Media, and then we will, and that's it.
Absolutely. So Ian, so back at you. So question of the day, and I feel like this is a question everybody wants to hear the answer to. So what's Do Media's take on replacing years of peer-to-peer market expertise experience through automation?
Yeah. So again, we really don't think that is replaceable. We think that it ultimately is going to come down to the expertise of a buyer, knowing what inventory is going to make the biggest impact for their client. But what we need to do is furnish the data to them so that they can do more of that high value work that they're hyper qualified to do, as Lucy talked about earlier, and just making it easier and easier and easier and chipping away at all the manual processes until it really is just this pure creative, pure strategic work without all the manual labor that makes it really bad. Because the truth is that, I don't know if there are a lot of agency media buyer people in this room, but you guys probably didn't work super hard and beat out everybody else and climb to the top of this entire industry and get these amazing marquee Fortune 500 clients because you just love BCCing people on email. It's probably because you think you have a unique and valuable contribution to make to this space, to make to your brands, and we want to maximize the amount of time you spend realizing that contribution. And on the supply side, it's the same thing, right? We want to keep highly qualified sellers, talented media consultants doing the relationship building and the advising work that makes them very valuable as a part of this value chain, rather than being like, what billboards can I sell today? Let me check a bunch of software. That's not something that anyone in here is uniquely qualified to do, and we want to make sure that the stuff that people are uniquely qualified to do is where they get to spend their time, because then we'll all be happy and we'll do better work.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just reiterate the same, that there's just going to be more of a focus on areas where we can add creativity and more complexity. I think with people's time being spent on how we can move the industry forward, how we can bring unique ideas to our clients, that's going to be way more valuable than doing tasks that we can replace with computers. And I think on top of that, it's also just going to be a bit of a shift in terms of where people's expertise are. I think nothing will replace the expertise that our industry already has, but it doesn't mean we can't learn new things. And I think that sort of embracing the ability to learn about other aspects of, whether it's going back to the data conversation, as well as thinking about things like attribution, where we can now have a very different conversation with clients and brands about why they should be thinking about out of home. And especially if we can change that conversation to be about proving that out of home actually is impacting real world results, whether that's sales or foot traffic or whatever it is, that's a very different conversation about out of home as opposed to it just being a reach play. So I think it's just allowing for the expertise in this room to change a little bit, and I think it's going to be really interesting what we're going to see in the future.
Thank you. Thank you both. Really amazing insight, honestly. So in close, one last question for the both of you. Where do you see automation going in the next 5 to 10 years, and how do you see it influencing or continuing to influence our industry?
Is it okay if I take that one?
Cool.
Yeah. So I'm going to break with decorum a little bit here, and I'm going to stand up and I'm going to read, because this is like the one opportunity to say something that, at least at Do Media, when we do our research and we do our analysis, is, there's one hard thing that we think we've learned, and I touched on it a little bit earlier, which is about the long tail of this industry. And I don't want to leave this room without saying this, because I think it's incredibly, incredibly important, which is that basically, I was talking to somebody in our booth yesterday, and I said, turn around, look at all of the people exhibiting here. It's easy to pick out $100 million at least in venture capital that's been invested in technology to help expert buyers buy somewhat more out-of-home media, right? By one way or another, whether it's supply-side technology, demand-side technology, attribution, measurement, what we're really talking about is helping someone that already was buying out-of-home buy more out-of-home, some amount more out-of-home. And that's good and it's important, but when you look around that same room, I bet you couldn't pick out $10 million that's been invested in helping the people that give us half of all the money spent in this industry, which is the local long tail. Right now, if you want to buy a billboard, your first billboard, what you have to do is you have to see a billboard, read the tiny type at the bottom, Google the name of that company, fill out a lead capture form, talk to a stranger, trust that stranger, and then hope you don't get fired for giving them like a huge amount of money that you probably have never spent in that way before. And that's a super, super, super high barrier to entry to being able to inject money into this industry. Like I said before, there's 3.5 million people out there Googling, how do I buy a billboard? And if we can make that easy for them, if we can just say, here's what's available, here's how much it costs, this is not something you should be afraid of, this is not something you should be concerned is going to get you in trouble with your boss because you didn't do it right. As we improve access, as we democratize this space, that's where there's the opportunity for, like we talked about earlier, really, really massive marginal gain in the amount that this space can grow. If you were able to sell just half of the new people Googling how do I buy a billboard, a $1,000 billboard, that would create 20% year-over-year industry growth. And most people in our experience that are buying that first-time billboard on the long tail actually spend $4,500. So when we talk about how to grow this industry, how to supercharge it, like there's cool stuff coming down the pipeline in programmatic. There's cool stuff coming down the pipeline in terms of very sophisticated automation. But what's here right now, what is totally accomplishable today when we leave this room, is to make it super easy to buy a billboard online with a credit card at the click of a button, and that's a multi-billion-dollar opportunity for this business. Just answering people's simple questions and helping them not be afraid and intimidated. And so that's what's really, really exciting for us. And now I'll sit down, and I'm sorry.
And I think my response is probably a little bit simpler. I think the biggest change that we're going to see is going to be adoption. I think we're we're talking about really innovative concepts. We're talking about the ability to harness data and to provide attribution. But I think the biggest change is going to be us actually doing it. So understanding and being educated on the products that are in the space, how you can use them, how they'll benefit your clients, the comfort in does this actually work, and making sure that what you provide is something that is going to work, that it's real. So I think really the biggest change that we're going to see is, there's a lot of companies that are out there that are starting to either emerge within the out-of-home space that are new, that are trying to solve some of these problems. There's a lot that are, within the digital space that are kind of coming into out-of-home to help to add. But I think the biggest thing is going to be some of that fragmentation to go away. So some consolidation of what these products are, which ones work, and those kind of rising to the top, and then just people actually doing it and using it. So I think, from what I've seen so far, it seems like we've only just scratched the surface. So I'm excited to, again, just sort of see which products and which concepts we're able to kind of drive forward. And I think, data and attribution is going to be a big part of that. So I'm actually going to throw this one back to you.
Oh.
But, where do you see things going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, curveball. Okay. I'm going to
Making it interesting.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of what you just said. I think attribution is definitely where I foresee the biggest opportunity with automation. For someone that spends a lot of their time trying to define and develop ROI models for what we do on a day-to-day basis, if there's a way we could build out that process and build it to where that it's automated, so that we're spending more time evaluating the results of that information, of that attribution, so that we can take those learnings and apply it to future campaigns. I think that's a big win for us. So thank you both again for your time. Really, really amazing insight. So one question for the crowd. Are we still scared of automation? I hope not, right? Okay, good. So, every year we come to this convention and we talk about innovation this and innovation that. And yes, we are innovating and we're doing a lot in the digital space, but it's really moving at a snail's pace. And I really think that the onus is on us to take that ownership and to really drive automation within our respective companies. And for those of you that caught the keynote this morning, Nick Bryan, Dentsu Age's CEO, he talked about the industry's consistent growth year over year, but we've really been at that 4% market share. What are we doing, or what are we not doing to get us past that hump? We need to get to 8, 10, 20%. The world's biggest industries, agriculture and shipping, logistics, financial services, banking, they are as profitable and as big as they are because they innovate and because they automate. So why can't we do the exact same thing? I ask you guys that question. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We'll open it up for Q&A if anyone has any questions.
I can take the mic to anyone who has a question.
No questions at all? Martin.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, did everyone get that by chance? No?
We'll bring the mic next time.
Okay. So, well, Martin Porter of Postoscope actually said that maybe we should give him the mic. You want to give him the
Here,
mic?
I'm bringing it to you.
You got to say it again, Martin. You said it better. You would say it better than I would.
There we go.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think the point is I say that automation will speed up the transactional part of what we do, and it should then open up time for us on the buy side and also for the sell side, that we can actually do better work for clients. There's a lot of people selling a lot of things out there, and everyone wants a piece of time to be like, I've got this great idea for client X. And for a large part of it, it's not that we don't want to take that to clients. We're just bogged down in the transactional element that is manual, that you could actually, if we could automate some of those processes, it would just open up so much more time for all parties, that we can actually just do better strategic work and grow that 4% share.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think the important thing to note there is that we're not going to have a full service solution that's going to service the entire industry. It's just impossible. There's hundreds of agencies. There's over 2,500 media operators in the country, in our industry. Getting one type of platform to service us all it's just not possible. It's not going to be possible. So again, the onus is really on us to take that in-house, to innovate and automate on our own, so that, as Martin suggested, we spend more time on strategic initiatives for our clients.
And I'll kind of flip that around too. I think part of it is figuring out within the agency kind of how to streamline those processes. But I also think as companies that are servicing brands and agencies, a company like Vistar, what we should be doing is also asking our buyers and those that are our clients, what are the parts of the process that are hard? And that are hard kind of for no reason. And so how can we help to streamline the things that you do? And, as technology companies, that should be a focus of what we build. It shouldn't just be about these grandiose ideas. It should be also about us listening to those that are using our products and figuring out how we can allow for you to spend more time, in those early conversations around strategy, so that as a whole, we're influencing the brand community to start looking at out-of-home differently, and kind of us having that opportunity to be part of the early conversations, as opposed to just at the tail end of, okay, we've now decided this much is going to go to out-of-home. We should be influencing that at the start to try and make that pie bigger.
I think we have a really good example of one that came for us this year from listening to a client. So I'm up here, I'm going crazy talking about marketplace effects and like marketplace equilibrium and this side and that side. Well, that's all really exciting to me, but do you know what made the biggest difference for our clients this year? Is we made a thing that automatically makes PowerPoint presentations. That's super not cool. It's really boring, but you know what? It saved people like hundreds and hundreds of hours this year. And so it's important to listen. As I said, that was kind of one of our watchwords, so you're on point, definitely.
Yeah, thank you guys. Any other questions? Yes.
So much of the focus on automation has been obviously around where digital can transact so much easier because of ad serving and everything like that. And you mentioned, listening to the buy side and what we need. But what I feel in my experience, my tenure, has been on connecting the dots on the other side. I believe both of you in your experience and kind of different sides of the automation world have, run up against that challenge where on the supply side of the traditional outdoor, opening up the pipes to have visibility and availability. Yep. They all suck. Right? So we all know the RFP process, and just tapping into that piece, exactly at this point, we want to take kind of that, we want to make sure that we have those relationships with our sellers. They know their inventory. We don't want to take away that relationship and the strategy side, but ease those pain points on both sides on traditionally. You guys have experience in getting any headway and traction on the supply side.
So actually, that's really interesting. That's what we're here. It's pretty much the only thing we're here to talk about this week. So, and it actually does tie back to the long tail stuff. So it is difficult, as I think we all know, as you just said, for a single agency to move the market and open up those pipes to pricing and availability. But where you can create that opportunity, and where we actually unfortunately have created that opportunity, is by aggregating a lot of long tail demand. So right now, today, our marketplace generates 4 times more leads than we're able to send to the supply side without just making them so mad that they mail us glitter. It's bad. But that's actually just our organic growth. I could literally press a button and turn on advertising that would 10x the amount of leads we generate through our marketplace. And so we're saying the supply side right now can only answer 1/40th of the demand that this website that's only been around for a year can produce. And so when you start to aggregate that demand, it really does necessitate access to availability. And as soon as availability is in platforms like ours that service the entire industry, it's obviously going to become available, it's naturally going to become available to the agencies. So I actually think this is a flywheel effect that's going to start to turn really fast as we see investment in aggregating demand start to take off.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, part of it is around creating inventory management tools for the supply side. So I think when you think about, anyone that booked their flight to come here, like it's a very basic concept. You can, see what's available, select your seat. It's very simplistic, and obviously these airlines know what they have available. They also work with other resellers, so they'll be able to show their inventory on Expedia or Orbitz or whoever they're working with. And I think that that's a really good example of kind of the value of knowing the inventory you have available and being able to monetize it. And I think that the out-of-home industry has been around for a really long time, so it's a bit difficult to have all of these different systems all speak to each other. Especially you think about a lot of the larger billboard companies that have been around for a long time. That's partially due to acquisition, and so there's all different types of systems that are running on the back end. So I think helping to be able to understand the inventory that's available, and for us as a company to create products that allow not just for a lot of times when specifically Lucy, when I'm speaking as a person that's representing the demand side of Vistar, I'm mostly talking about our DSP that people are able to log into and kind of see what's available based off of forecasting tools. So it's looking at, how many ad requests we've gotten in the last 30 days. But we also want to make tools, and our company is kind of looking to focus on specifically for the supply side, not just what's going to make them more money in programmatic, but what's going to make them more money overall, and how they can better understand the inventory that they have, which of course also incorporates static, which is an element that isn't digitized.
There's a question over there.
That's what the last guy said.
So with the automation, and as you're starting to pull, humans out of it, and especially, I guess, as you're talking about like small businesses, maybe medium businesses have a little bit more experience, but how do you guys see the quality, like the total quality of the industry also increasing as we're trying to talk about storytelling and what these different types of experiential and transit and bicycles and how you can pull all that into like somebody's life and their journey throughout their day? How do you keep that quality once you've pulled out the experts on the sell side?
So I think that we don't want to pull all of that out necessarily, but the difference between the need for expertise for very sophisticated buyers and the need for expertise for very unsophisticated buyers, small businesses, is that yes, all of those small businesses need to know 5, 10 really important things that are going to help them be successful, but they mostly all need to know the same 10 things. And it has to do with making data available, contextualizing that data with best practices, but both of those things are things that in their own right can be automated, right? We can say, oh, this buyer meets these criteria, and we've lead scored them as a silver, meaning they're probably unlikely to have enough money to really make the impact they need to make. So it's really important that someone call this person and see if they have an extra $3,000 to buy another board. Those kind of signals are baked into the data, and that kind of work can also be automated, I think.
Yeah, and I guess the two things I would add to that is, one, making things easy to understand. I think a lot of times when people think about automation and kind of how we're transforming, a lot of times like really big words are thrown around. It becomes a very complicated conversation when I think everyone needs to just make things easy to understand. as well as just making sure that transparency is still kind of at the forefront of everything that we're doing, so that people feel comfortable with what it is that is changing through automation, and what isn't.
And we should also recognize that, I mean, self-service ad platforms are among some of the most commonly used business software in the entire United States, right? Like, your local, car dealership has a person there who knows how to use Google AdWords, which is an incredibly sophisticated tool. They know how to buy Facebook ads. Those things are very sophisticated. Out of home has a lot of nuances to it, but it's not that we're talking to people who are buying my own advertising, get out of here, crazy person. Like, they're doing it in other sophisticated channels. And we just need to be prepared to identify the roadblocks, work collaboratively, look at the data, and squash those problems as we see them.
Yeah, and
You don't have data for. So, for instance, as a small operator, surrounded by large operators, I compete on service, quality service. You don't have anything to quantify that, yet I find customers willing to pay for that. So if I'm just competing with a number on the screen, it doesn't help.
Well, I mean, I would say customer service and relationships is never something that's going to go away. And I think that, even just looking around this room of, the relationships I can think from a personal level, that I've built with buyers that are here, if you have a good relationship and somebody trusts you, no level of data is ever going to fully replace that.
Yeah, and to your point, I'm going to comment back on that question as well. I mean, from an agency standpoint, the takeaway from here today is not to eliminate the experts on either side of the equation, on the agency side, on the media owner side, not to eliminate that relationship between media agencies and their vendor partners. The takeaway is that we want to automate the transactional process so that the two parties can work together on more strategic initiatives. That's the takeaway here. So whether it's some sort of an experiential campaign or something along those lines, we want to be able to invest more time doing those types of things rather than just sitting in Excel all day or trying to build a PowerPoint deck with 5,000 slides. I mean, the amount of time that's wasted on those types of processes is just mind-blowing. So you may not have that type of experience because you're on the other side of the business, but from the agency side, we are still spending a lot of time doing these types of mundane things. So we want to eliminate that so that we could work closely with you guys. You know your inventory better than anybody else. So we want to be able to rely on you and build that relationship and again, work on these strategic initiatives together.
And when we talk about the sort of fully automated e-commerce process, I think what we see is that these users are self-selecting at the very beginning. So what they want is to make these decisions themselves. What they want is to be empowered with data. And so what at least the people at Lamar have told us is that the people that come through our local marketplace are not the people their local salespeople call. It's an entirely different audience that is self-selected for a different buying experience that they feel more comfortable with. So I think the answer is, if you're building a business based on relationships, the relationships you have and the people you're calling and prospecting are still going to be what you do every single day. But what we're also going to do is get you a ton of at-bats for people that might have just given up before they even ever tried. And when those people do buy from you, they're going to see your name on that billboard, right? They're going to call you next time. They're going to become your customers. And so you're still going to get that into the mix on the second sale, on the third sale, and you're going to use your competitive advantage to cement those people. So again, just echoing, there is no replacement for experience, but there is a huge number of people who just want to buy an ad with their credit card and give us their money. And those two things aren't mutually exclusive ideas.
Yeah, and to add to that, so we've at PostalScope developed an automated process, buying and planning process that still allows our buyers to work with the media owners. So it has an influx of data that exists within the platform that allows us to analyze and evaluate down to the geographic level, but we cap it there. The system doesn't evaluate the actual media, the actual billboards, the actual placements themselves. We put the onus on our buyers and our planners to figure out whether or not that billboard is the right fit. The system just automates the process and helps guide them to that location. If that helps. I think there was a question here.
I think the automation is a great thing, and being able to do that and work together, I think that's something that we all need to do, because if we can all spend more time helping the clients telling the story, I think that's the best thing to do. think what makes it so hard on the vendor side, on people who have that, is the whole system and how it changes. Because you did the analogy of a seat on a plane, but if it is a specific structure that you're looking for, there's only one seat on that plane. And so if 10 people are looking at it and one person has it on hold, is that seat really available or not? And I think that's part of what comes up with that, is because unlike radio, TV, a big digital network where you have a lot of people looking at the same thing and potentially buying at the same time, when it is a specific structure, a specific place-based, there's only one. And that's what makes, I think, the hard part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree with that. I think part of it is progress, as opposed to necessarily a 100% solution. So I think understanding what's available to a degree is definitely helps get us closer. So I think, to your point, the plane analogy is kind of saying the perfect scenario. And I think in out of home in general, you know, you're just dealing with a mix of inventory sources. You know, when you're thinking about booking on a single flight, to your point, there is only one seat in certain cases, but it's also a selection of maybe there's 5 seats, or are people looking at the same seat at one time? And so I think out of home, there's a lot of similarities between the two, but I think there's different reasons for people to be buying an out of home. I think that there are scenarios where someone is looking for something that is very specific and very strategic. You know, if you want something that's near your store and there's only one board, nothing is going to replace that. No level of data is going to tell you to buy something else. But at the same time, being able to understand and kind of move outside of there are more options of different inventory sources that you could look into. And so knowing what those are just kind of provides you with some additional power and opportunities for you to bring to your clients, as opposed to just thinking about that one screen.
So I think geocache showing everything that's there, I think is great. You can see everything. I think that that's an amazing step that we've come to where before you did not have. And having that all in one central place with all the numbers, I think is an amazing step forward for when I started in this industry.
Yeah, agreed.
I think, just to echo a little bit, like, that's where I think we never will erase that problem. I think you're right to point it out as a real significant problem, but I think the hope is that making data very easy to use and very, very available is going to create fewer and fewer times when there is only one plane seat. Because there may be one plane seat that that person loves, but if data is really available, they might find out that there's actually 4 identical plane seats that they just didn't know about or wouldn't have evaluated because that data wasn't at their fingertips. So again, it's not a problem that's going away, but it is a problem that I think we as an industry can make happen much less.
Yes.
As a smaller independent outdoor company, I think one of the things that I've seen a lot is fear of loss of control and identity in turning over information like that in kind of a connection to the airline. You can buy plane tickets from Southwest or Alaska, and their buying systems look fairly identical, but it's working solely off of their inventory. Or you can buy from Travelocity, and you become part of the mass, and it just becomes a price shopping thing. And I think it would be interesting if there was a buying skin that individual outdoor companies could use, where their inventory was displayed and it was a portal for buying from their company. I would think that would be a bridge that would be much easier then to tie to a higher level than going to a single source. I just wonder if there's anybody that's working on that sort of a skin.
Well, I think one thing that I would kind of say there is that value is relative. So the value of a board to one brand could be vastly different than to another. Part of that could be based on proximity. It could be based on, you know, thinking about audience data and, you know, understanding the people that could be kind of more likely to see that screen. That could be completely different for how a healthcare company views that versus a QSR. So I think, you know, one of the things to sort of separate is how data can be applied, just generally speaking, that it doesn't just rank a board as saying its value is X or just based on price, because what that value is to one brand is completely different than another. So I think the fear of making your inventory available in a system is just making it discoverable, to your point earlier. From there's still a reason to have a conversation and for you to kind of bring all the unique benefits of what those screens have based on the client, because data's only going to tell you so much. If a system can allow you to see it, that's great. And then kind of in order to get to that finish line, that's probably still going to require a conversation.
So yes is my answer to that. We have that 100% scoped. We're just waiting for someone to be really interested in having it from us. So if you are interested, Ken, our CEO, is right there. You should tell him that you think that sounds like a good idea, because I actually do think it sounds like a really good idea. And we have to wrap up, but if you have more questions, I'll wait out in the hallway. We can talk about more stuff.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, guys.